Welcome back to Sports Rule Pod. I'm Nick Elam. Here we explore innovations in sports and the journeys of individuals who make sports great. There are many ways to engage with the podcast on YouTube, X, or Instagram at Sports Rule Pod, or by email nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com. And you can find Sports Rule Pod on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, or Apple Podcasts. In the interview segment today, we're joined by Jerry Coleman, who is one of the preeminent voices of Baltimore sports talk for over 30 years. Jerry will share the main difference between a Baltimore sports fan and a D.C. sports fan. He'll also share what it's like to have former athletes as co-hosts. And Jerry, a avid tennis player, will share some strong feelings about the emergence of pickleball. And in the innovation segment, we have another fan-submitted idea, and a pretty good one too, ways to boost up MLB's All-Star Monday. And in the next to last segment, we revisit the next to last half inning of the 1960 World Series, a half inning that was sandwiched between two of the most impactful home runs in playoff history. Let's get to it. We are so fortunate to be joined today by Jerry Coleman. He is the sports director of 100.7 The Bay in Baltimore. He is the host of the Bmore baseball podcast and Bmore football podcast, and he's been a fixture in Baltimore sports media for over 30 years. Jerry Coleman, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Nick. It's a pleasure.
Now, you have covered major sporting events, 10 Super Bowls. You've covered Cal Ripken's historic 2,131st consecutive game played. In your role in covering those, what exactly has been your role?
Well, it's been mostly as a reporter. I evolved into a talk show host and now a podcast host, but began as a reporter. So during those two nights, 2,130 and 2,131 back in September of 1995, it was kind of a two-day affair. So I was there to cover all the events surrounding these two milestone games, including interviews with, dignitaries that were there, covering the game itself, hearing from Cal, his colleagues, his teammates. So it was an event-filled 2 days and quite memorable. Probably one of the top 5 sporting events I've covered.
Now, when you're assigned to cover an event like that, what is your approach? Is your approach to try to get the main story that might be covered well by others, or are you trying to get a different angle that might not be covered by others?
Always a different angle, Nick, because, try not to join the crowd in that category, try to do something different. So always looking for a different angle. And, for those particular 2 games, there were a lot of dignitaries that were there, from Joe DiMaggio to Hank Aaron, filmmaker Barry Levinson. So there were a lot of people to talk to about Cal's career and where they were when it started. Did they ever think we would reach this possible day, which, seemed like it was so unlikely, but the streak began back in 1982 and carried through until 1995 without this guy missing a game. At one point, he had an inning streak going as well. So it was a buildup, and I was fortunate to cover most of his career. There was a lot of debate at the time as to whether or not he should take a day off and give himself a rest and give the team a boost, and that was never his mindset whatsoever. So it was just a remarkable time back then, and something we'll never see again, in my opinion, with the way guys are playing so seldom today.
Well, you're speaking with one of Cal Ripken's all-time biggest fans. Even growing up in Ohio, when I started collecting baseball cards and realized that he and I both had the same birthday of August 24th, he was my guy from that point forward. And I didn't know it at the time of how special he truly was, but obviously came to be one of the most legendary figures in baseball, one of the all-time greatest shortstops, and probably means more to the city of Baltimore than just about anyone. Describe, what does Cal Ripken mean to the city of Baltimore, and can you think of other athletes on a short list in other cities who can even compare meaning the same thing to their city?
Yeah, Cal means so much to the city of Baltimore. He's become a fixture, obviously, having played for the Orioles and now a part of the ownership group. So he's more visible at Oriole games than ever before. There was a period of time when Peter Angelos owned the team and Cal was almost invisible. You could tell there was a fractured relationship, but the new owner, David Rubenstein, has brought him in as part of the ownership group. So you'll see him sitting front row right there behind home plate at a lot of games this season. As far as what he means, I mean, everything. I mean, he's iconic here in Baltimore, having grown up in this area, although albeit in Aberdeen, Maryland, which is outside the city. And as far as guys that may hold the same, level of domination or fixtures in their respective cities, sure. I mean, growing up, there were guys like Nick, like George Brett in Kansas City, Robin Yount in Milwaukee, Tony Gwynn in San Diego. These guys were fixtures. They were part of the fabric of those cities, just like Cal was, and immersed in the culture. And I still think they make their homes in those respective cities as well, just like Cal.
Now, in all those interactions with dignitaries that you had on those historic nights, is there an interaction or a takeaway that you have that still stays with you to this day?
Yeah, Joe DiMaggio wasn't that congenial. He didn't have a lot to say. I had heard about his demeanor before I got a chance to speak with him, and very short spoken, and just a guy that just didn't really want to have a long conversation with anyone. I mean, I don't want to call him a curmudgeon, but you could describe him that way, especially compared to Hank Aaron, who was also there that night, Nick, and he was very outgoing. Hank Aaron, you know, every time I've spoken with Hank Aaron throughout his career, God rest his soul, he was very outgoing, had a lot to say, complimentary of Cal, the city of Baltimore, and all that. Joe DiMaggio, it looked like it was an inconvenience for me to have to talk to him.
Now, for me, growing up in the Midwest, all I know about Baltimore sports is mainly through my fandom of Cal Ripken. So here I am speaking with a native of Baltimore and a mainstay in Baltimore sports media, thinking about some comparisons. I mean, here in the Midwest, we take pride in the Kentucky Derby. We love the Kentucky Derby, but you have the Preakness Stakes. What would you say is maybe better about the Preakness Stakes compared to the Kentucky Derby, which tends to get much more attention?
There's not a whole lot I can say that's much better, that makes the Preakness much better than the Kentucky Derby. With all due respect, I love the Preakness. This year, it's being moved to Laurel Park. There is a big story brewing. I'll tell you right here. This is a big story to watch for coming up in a couple of months when they run the Derby and they run the Preakness. There's going to be a lot of talk about what's going on with Pimlico. This is a racetrack that's over 150 years old. Just had Preakness 150, but it's fallen apart, and they were supposed to start renovating that place the day after the Preakness last year. They haven't touched it since. So this will become an enormous story because they're moving the Preakness after 150 years to Laurel. They're going to limit the ticket capacity, so it's going to look like it was during COVID. As far as the race, I mean, the only better thing about it is you still have a chance for the Triple Crown to be alive. That's what the Preakness is all about. The horse that won the Derby, if they come out and win the Preakness, then they're headed to Belmont with a chance for history. But as far as the two facilities, Nick, there is no comparison. Kentucky Derby, Churchill Downs is iconic. I mean, they've poured over $100 million into that facility. They haven't even come close to that at Pimlico. They have to knock it to the ground and build it back up again. So right now, unfortunately, there is no comparison between the two races, as much as I love them both and have been biased towards the run for the Black-Eyed Susans. It's the Run for the Roses. That's the most iconic race in all of the world, the Kentucky Derby.
You're learning more about the Beltway. Compare a Baltimore sports fan to a D.C. sports fan.
Interesting. Well, the D.C. sports fan has a lot more at their fingertips in terms of 4 professional sports teams. Baltimore just has 2 in the NFL and Major League Baseball. But I would say the passion of the Baltimore sports fan is superior to the D.C. sports fan. Why? Because most of the people around here come from Baltimore. D.C. is a very transient city, as you know. It flips over maybe every 4 years, sometimes less than that. So a lot of the so-called sports fans in D.C. didn't even grow up there. They're not even from that area. They're just there because of their job, whether it's working for the federal government or some other reason. So I find Baltimore to be a more passionate sports town, although with less options.
Now that I live in Indianapolis, there's an obvious connection with the Colts and their current home of Indianapolis and their former home of Baltimore, and the much documented story of their overnight move from Baltimore to Indianapolis in 1983. How did you find out about that overnight move of the Colts out of Baltimore?
The internet. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, that wasn't around then. No Twitter, no social media. It was the old-fashioned radio, Nick. I was a radio guy from start till now, and just happened to have one of the local radio stations on that night, and they were breaking into programming with this unbelievable news. And I happen to live in Owings Mills, where the Ravens train, where the Colts departed. The road they rode down in the Mayflower vans on their way to Indianapolis is right outside my house. So it was such a discouraging time. I can't tell you. I was a young kid at that time in my teens and was looking forward to rooting for an NFL team. And then we go a dozen years without having a team around. It was really devastating, not only for me, but for the entire fan base here. Although they didn't support the Colts at the end, I didn't think they deserved to have the team moved out in the middle of the night.
Well, and I can't imagine how heartbreaking that would be, being a Cincinnati Reds fan and Dayton Flyers fan. I'm used to heartbreak, but not that kind of heartbreak. And I can't imagine how you would try to fill that void. So from 1983, when the Colts left Baltimore, to 1996, when the Ravens came to town, who did you root for, and who did most Baltimore residents root for during that time?
So when that occurred, Jack Kent Cooke was owning the team that was known as the Washington Redskins, and their games were shoved down the proverbial throats of all the Baltimoreans who had rooted for the Colts and despised the Redskins. But those were the games we were getting every weekend. It was like we were part of the Redskins fan base, and no one wanted to be a part of that fan base. So as far as me, I just rooted for the NFL. But in terms of occupational purposes, when there was no football team here, I covered the Redskins in the late 90s. I'm sorry, in the late 80s and early 90s before Baltimore got the Ravens. So I would go out to RFK Stadium almost every Sunday and cover that team. They won a Super Bowl when I covered them back in 1991, but it wasn't the same, not having your hometown team. And it was great when the Ravens finally arrived, but there was a void in this town for over a dozen years. And people sometimes forget that when they bash on the Ravens and talk detrimental about football in general. I always remind them there was a period of time where we didn't have anything to look forward to on a Sunday.
We're here with Jerry Coleman. Love to learn more about your career journey. Now, you earned a radio and television degree from Ithaca College in 1990. What lessons from your studies there still hold true in sports media today?
Interesting. Well, lots change in the landscape of sports media, but the basic ethics, the fundamental properties of journalism still exist. The decorum, the things that I learned was how to handle yourself in the course of an interview, how to maintain your composure, the right questions to ask, the ones you want to avoid, not making yourself part of the story, if at all possible, although sometimes that has become the case, unfortunately. There was an instance with the city of Buffalo where things went awry. But, that's some of the core things that I learned at Ithaca College, where I studied both radio and television. But since I have a face for radio, I went into radio, and now podcasting has added a video aspect to it, which is why you can see me. So those are some of the things I learned. And I went there because, Ithaca College lets you start and get involved in radio and television your freshman year. The other choice would have been Syracuse. They wanted you to wait until your junior year, and I thought I knew it all my freshman year. I didn't, but I wanted to get involved, so that's why I chose Ithaca. Would I do it again? No. Worst weather in the United States. Barely saw the sun, so some regrets with the weather, but got a great education up there.
What were some of the first jobs you had right out of college, and what did you learn during that time?
A lot of the jobs out of college started out being internships. And kids, back in those days, they didn't pay interns. You got credits or you just did it for free and got the experience. Things have changed. So did a number of different internships with local media people here, local stations, even a summer at CNN. And that all helped prep me for my career.
When was the first time in your career where you really felt like you had creative autonomy? And was that scary, or did you embrace it right away?
It was a little scary. And, it was early on when I was able to go out and do interviews one-on-one with athletes. It started at the scholastic level with high school athletes, so I wasn't as intimidated. But by that time, I had interviewed professional athletes. So I'm not one to get intimidated by a professional athlete, Nick. So that was never really a case where I felt afraid or scared. I pride myself on asking the difficult questions that maybe other people are too afraid to ask.
Now, thinking about, now that we have a little glimpse of what it is that you try to bring to your own style, what are some sports talk shows that you enjoy watching or listening to?
There's quite a few. I have a buddy who does the Fox Sports radio show out of Los Angeles named Ben Maller. I like to listen to local radio as well. Pardon the Interruption is a show that I've been watching and following because I've known Mike and Tony since they were covering sports around here. So that's been a regular part of my viewing and listening habit. And then a lot of local sports talk radio is what I like to listen to just to keep my finger on the pulse.
Yes, Pardon the Interruption is also one of my favorites, and probably also where I know most of my Beltway sports, since as you said, Tony and Mike,
Oh, yeah.
both have been there. So, thinking about who you've worked with former athletes on your podcast and your projects, Adam Jones, Mike Bordick, just to name a few. So, what is it about former athletes like them who are able to thrive in sports media? What is it that they do that make that transition so well? And for others athletes who maybe don't make the transition so well, and you don't necessarily have to name names, what is it that makes them struggle, do you think?
I think being out of the limelight and being in this routine through most of their lives where they're playing sports every day and they have a regimented schedule, Nick. So they were used to waking up and practice at this time and meals at this time and a game at this time and dinner at this time. And then everything gets thrown awry. And, that was the way with Adam Jones, who I started the podcast with right after he got out of baseball and was looking for something to do. Same with Mike Bordick. These guys are looking to stay in the game and have a voice. And, I just act as a guide for my media experience, and they lean on me for some things to help them make a better podcast. But they have the background and the information that I certainly don't have from their experience of playing at a level most of us will never see. So it's unique in having someone with that special set of skills, but they're still learning to be a broadcaster as well. And you're seeing athletes more and more try and do this and take their, own brand into their own domain and start their own podcast. And that's why almost every athlete, it seems, has a podcast these days. They're like a dime a dozen. It's getting a little bit overload, but that's the way they feel like they can get their message out without being distorted by the mainstream media, as they say.
Athletes and non-athletes starting their own podcasts, so guilty as charged. Thinking about opportunities where you've served as a mentor throughout your career, can you think of a time when you've served in kind of a mentor role, and what are the lessons that you try to share in that role?
Well, mostly not with athletes. I mean, I do help out athletes in terms of improving their answers and trying to give them tips on how to handle a question. And, you want to keep it under a minute and a half, I always tell them, and keep it brief and get to the point, not go in circles. As far as other broadcasters, again, I just tried to tell them to keep it brief, make your point, be informative, be entertaining, but be correct as well, because there's too much misinformation going on out there. So these guys are respected, these former athletes. People value their opinions because of their experience and their background, and it's very important that they come across correctly.
In your time, especially working in local news, it can be like a marriage, and that having that relationship, that long-term relationship with certain figures within sports and locally. What is your approach to developing trust with someone, whether they're a source or just someone that you want to have give candid answers? What's your approach to developing that trust in the long term?
Well, first of all, you cultivate that relationship, and hopefully that person knows your background. Having been in Baltimore covering sports for 36 years, I've developed some really good contacts at very high levels. People that have known me since the early 90s that can trust me, that know that I'm not going to, give something out that's background information or something that's off the record. So you have to, develop the trust and cultivate that relationship and not burn that person. And as long as you keep that course, you're going to usually keep that relationship going with that person. It's when you lose trust and you break the code. There's a lot of stuff they will tell you that is off the record that could be highly embarrassing for that person. You use that as background information to explain your point of view, to explain your reasoning without citing that source and saying, well, this person told me this.
I'd like to get your takes on some different innovations in the sports world. And before we get into baseball and football, or back into baseball and football, I should say, should note that like you, or like me, that you are an avid tennis player. I'm curious, being an avid tennis player, what are your thoughts on pickleball?
Hate it. Hate it. I'm going to offend some people right now. Pickleball's for losers. Pickleball is for people that can't play tennis. I'm sorry if I offended you, but I've tried playing pickleball. Every time I play pickleball, I get injured, Nick, okay? Every single time. I've been a longtime tennis player. I don't mind pickleball to a degree, but I can't keep score. I don't understand that. It's like ping pong on steroids. I find tennis to be a more finesse sport. I never really get injured in tennis except when I'm lunging for a drop shot and hurt my lower back. But it seems like every time I'm on a pickleball court, I walk off limping or my back hurts or I've hurt my knee. You've seen the uptick in injuries in pickleball injuries. I mean, the doctors are loving it, but I think it's come on way too fast. I'm also a bit bitter, I'll admit it, if you can't tell by my tone, and the fact that they've turned a number of tennis facilities into pickleball courts and just excluded the tennis community altogether like they didn't exist at once. So that's why I'm a little biased and a little perturbed at the pickleball people. I love ping pong, by the way, but tennis is my jam, Nick.
Well, I'm kind of aligned with you on that. Is where I much prefer tennis. Pickleball, it has a place, that's fine, but when it starts to encroach on the tennis facilities, then that makes me sad.
Yeah,
I'd like to get some.
Balls are being turned into pickleball courts now. What are we doing here?
Like to get some rapid fire takes on some different innovations in your main sports of baseball and football. Let's start with the ghost runner rule in baseball. What are your thoughts?
I don't mind it. A lot of people do hate it, including my colleague, Mike Bordick. And the reason I don't mind it is because it wraps up the game quicker. Let's get to a conclusion with the game, okay? I think it does help shorten the game. The automatic ball strike system, challenge system, I don't think is shortening the game, but I don't mind the ghost runner as much as others. I do think you should eliminate it for postseason play. I don't think it should be a part of the playoffs. You can play all night long if a playoff game is at stake and a chance to win a world championship. But during the regular season, no problem with it.
Sure. And yeah, in the 2025 World Series, we saw Game 3 go 18 innings and end on a Freddie Freeman walk-off home run. That game was amazing, and yeah, it would not have been made better by that ghost runner rule. You had mentioned the ABS challenge system that's new here in 2026. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting because it's added a layer of drama to the game. And you have to be careful about when you use these challenges. You only get two, but if you keep getting them right, you don't lose them. So you don't want to burn them early in the first or second inning. And I think a lot of teams are finding out the hard way about that. You want to save it for when the game is on the line. The game's usually not on the line in the first or second inning. And, there's a lot of guys that feel like they were robbed of a strike call and they just take it upon themselves to, give the signal. And it's like, what are you doing, dude? You only have two of these. If you're not right, you're costing your team.
Yeah, it's really been interesting here in the early going. I know people feared that it would take away the human element. I think that it's enhanced the human element and added so much new to the human element that even I was not expecting at all. Thoughts on the pitch clock?
The pitch clock, I have no problem with. It keeps the game moving. Again, that's all part of it. I mean, baseball is losing a generation because of the way the things have gone, where they haven't connected with the younger generation for one reason or another, whether it be social media or the way the game's played at a slow pace. And we know today's youth, they don't have much patience. So they have to keep it moving, have to keep it entertaining. No problem at all with the pitch clock. I think it's worked well.
We're coming down the stretch here with Jerry Coleman, and I'd like to get a few of your thoughts on some football innovations. One that has been enacted is expanding the season to 17 games, and then there's discussion of possibly expanding it to 18 games. What are your thoughts on an expanded regular season?
I don't like it. And these owners are a bunch of hypocrites. All they do is talk about safety and, avoiding concussions and all that. So let's put the guys out in a regular season game one extra time and maybe take away a meaningless preseason game, which none of these guys play for or play in. It's all about money for the owners, extra revenue. That's all it is. I think the NFL players are going to put up a big fight for this. I don't see how this benefits the players. Yeah, they get an extra game check, I believe, but is it worth it in the long term? And what about player safety? That's all we hear about is player safety. So, we're going from 16 to 18 in an age where concussions are as bad as they've ever been. It just doesn't make sense, except it does make sense. It adds to the owner's wallet.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think even in that proposal, there's some form of it where it would be accompanied by a rule where every player has to sit out 2 games a year. Uh, but if that were to come to be, then you're automatically watering down your product by doing that. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. One last football innovation is new in 2026 in the United Football League. They're experimenting with a 4-point field goal. Any field goal that's over 60 yards is worth 4 points. What are your thoughts on that?
That's interesting. I like the gimmicks that some of these other teams or leagues do. I don't think that will come to the NFL, Nick. I don't, because I think we're seeing 60-yard field goals on a regular basis. I don't think there should be a bonus added to that in the NFL. They don't need that gimmick. But, a team like the Savannah Bananas or the minor leagues or a different football league, sure, go for it. Add something like that to make it a little interesting for the fan base, a little twist, if you will.
Yeah, I think in the NFL, I would be very much against that. I think it would actually have a lot of unintended consequences that haven't really been discussed widely. One last question for you. We'll get back into kind of the big picture mode here, thinking about your career as a whole. And when the story of Jerry Coleman's career is written and we look at the acknowledgement section, who are we going to see as some of the mentors and influential people who have helped you with your success?
Oh, wow. Well, I would have to start with my late mother, who was the one that really pushed me and not hard. She knew this is the choice I wanted to make, and she helped make it happen. And my father, too, but I'm a mama's boy, so she gets most of the credit. And then there's been some people along the way that have helped me out, whether it be professors at Ithaca College, guys in the local media here. I have a friend named Kenny Albert, who's a big-time sports broadcaster who I introduced to his wife, so he owes me for the rest of his life, but he's been a great colleague, and I don't want to call him a mentor because it'll go to his ego, but there's a lot of people that I lean on for advice and even former athletes as well to try and get their perspective. So you think you know it all after 35 years. Trust me, folks, you don't.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to share?
Well, just being a part of the podcast world is what we're doing right now. And Bmore Sports Pod is where everyone can find us, whether it be on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Enjoy doing the football and the baseball podcast right now, each and every week. Still doing some local radio here and there. Worried about the future of radio and where it's going as a longtime AM radio guy. Hearing that they're not going to be in cars in the future is disappointing. So that's why we've made the pivot to podcasting. That seems to be where the future's going.
Well, Jerry Coleman, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is a great Elam ending.
Thank you. In the innovation segment, we discuss innovations good and bad. And in this episode, we discuss our favorite kind of innovation, and that's a fan-submitted innovation. Remember, if you have an idea for a rule change or innovation and you're ready to share it with the world, you can submit that by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. The innovation in this episode was submitted by Patrick Gibbony for various changes to Major League Baseball's All-Star Monday festivities. So currently, MLB's All-Star Monday includes the Home Run Derby, and then from a television broadcast standpoint, it also includes a recorded version of the celebrity softball game, which is played on Sunday. Patrick's proposal calls for a few events to be added to All-Star Monday leading up to the Home Run Derby. And one of those would be a bunting derby where players aim for various targets on the field. And this type of an event actually already exists in Korea. And I think this type of event, a bunt derby, would have the potential to be a fun curiosity for many fans in the same way that curling is a curiosity that draws new viewers into the Olympics. Patrick's proposal also calls for skills competitions in the areas of fielding, throwing, base running, and this is my favorite of the different components of Patrick's proposal. Even though many of the All-Stars would likely sit out this type of event for fear of injury, I still think that you would find enough remaining All-Stars or even non-All-Stars who are just freakishly talented who would be willing to participate and show off their athleticism to make the event feel legitimate and worthwhile. And when recruiting players, Major League Baseball could even target players from teams that are not currently in the Home Run Derby to draw in more fan bases for the All-Star Monday festivities. But regardless of who participates, this would give fans an opportunity to see some amazing talent and athleticism and to be introduced to some players that they might not already know. Patrick's other component of his proposal applies to the Home Run Derby itself. And this would be a way to acknowledge players who not only hit home runs, but who hit the massive type of home runs that we marvel at during the home run derby. Essentially, instead of determining a winner based on who can tally the most home runs, the winners would be determined based on who can accumulate the greatest total distance among all of their home runs. And while I admire the spirit of this part of the proposal, I do think that it would present some major challenges from a presentation standpoint, both in the ballpark and on the television broadcast. Specifically, I think it's really important that fans understand immediately what the significance of every home run is so that they can have an instant and authentic reaction to it. This is easy when we're just tallying the number of home runs, but it's not as easy when we are tallying the distance measured in feet of all of the home runs. I'm also not sure if changing this method of determining a winner would have actually changed any of the outcomes of the previous home run derbies. I am a fan of factoring in distance as a tiebreaker in the home run derby, but Major League Baseball already does that to some extent. Overall, for the proposal of adding additional skills competitions for bunting, base running, fielding, throwing, along with modifying the home run derby to determine winners based on total distance accumulated, I give it a 7 out of 10 on the good idea scale. Of course, there's no requirement that all of these components would have to be implemented together. They could be implemented by just certain parts. But thank you, Patrick, for your submission. In the next to last segment, we revisit a next to last from the past. And in this particular episode, we revisit the next to last half inning of the 1960 World Series. That World Series pitted the New York Yankees and the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Yankees were seeking their 19th World Series championship of all time, and they were led by Yogi Berra, who was seeking the 9th World Series title of his own, along with Whitey Ford, Roger Maris, and Mickey Mantle. The Pirates were led by 1960 NL MVP Dick Groat and a young Roberto Clemente, as the franchise was seeking its 3rd World Series championship. The most succinct way to sum up this series is that the Pirates won the close games and the Yankees won the lopsided games all the way through the fateful Game 7, but that would be an understatement. The scores throughout the series were so out of whack that by the end of the series, the Yankees had outscored the Pirates 55-27, and this was the only World Series ever where the MVP was granted to a member of the losing team, Bobby Richardson of the Yankees. In that Game 7, the last 3 half innings, that being the bottom of the 8th, the top of the 9th, and the bottom of the 9th, were all noteworthy in their own way. The bottom of the 9th lasted only 2 pitches, with the second one resulting in Bill Mazeroski's walk-off home run to end the World Series, the first World Series ever to end on a home run, and aside from Joe Carter doing the same thing for the Blue Jays in 1993, the only time. The bottom of the 8th inning was wild, with the Pirates trailing 7-4 when they came up to bat, then scoring 5 runs to take a 9-7 lead. And that half inning included what some consider to be the most impactful swing in the history of baseball, Hal Smith's 3-run, 2-out home run to turn a 7-6 Pirates deficit into a 9-7 Pirates lead. When that pitch was thrown, the Pirates had a 30% chance of winning the World Series championship, and when the ball landed over the fence, the Pirates suddenly had a 93% chance of winning the championship. No other swing in baseball history has come close to improving a team's chances of winning a championship by the 63% increase from Hal Smith's home run. You might wonder why more famous swings, such as Mazeroski's or Carter's or Luis Gonzalez's or Edgar Renteria's, all of which ended the World Series, are not even in the top 5 in the list of most impactful swings. Well, it's because those teams already had a relatively favorable chance of winning the World Series at the time the pitch was thrown. Despite all of this, it's actually the half inning in between the top of the 9th that is the subject of this next to last, in part because it included maybe the most incomprehensible base running maneuver in the history of baseball. The stunned Yankees, now trailing 9-7 entering the top of the 9th, still had hope as Bobby Richardson and Dale Long led off the top of the 9th with back-to-back singles. The Pirates brought in Harvey Haddix to pitch, and he retired Roger Maris before allowing a single to Mickey Mantle that scored a run, put runners on first and third with 1 out, with the Yankees now trailing 9-8. And that's when things got weird. In stepped Yogi Berra, who grounded to Rocky Nelson, first baseman Rocky Nelson, who was standing right on the bag and who stepped right on the bag for the second out. And as we freeze it right there, with the play still going on, Mickey Mantle was stuck in no man's land, several feet away from first base and trying to get back to the base safely. Rocky Nelson, who was still standing right on first base with the ball in hand, all he had to do was tag Mickey Mantle and the World Series would be over. The Pirates would be champions right then and there. But Mantle, somehow through one of the luckiest, just hard to believe base running maneuvers of all time, somehow escaped this impossible situation and was able to dive back into first base safely. And even more fortunately for the Yankees, and what Mantle might not have realized when the ball was hit, was that the base runner on third, Gil McDougald, broke right away and he was able to score during the confusion, tying the game at 9. Harvey Haddix then retired Moose Skowron for the last out of the top of the 9th inning, setting up the bottom of the 9th and Bill Mazeroski's famous home run. This was the third World Series championship for the Pirates and their last at Forbes Field. And don't feel too bad for the Yankees either. They only had to wait until the next year, 1961, to win their 19th World Series championship, and the year after that to win their 20th. And those championships also happened to be the 9th and the 10th for Yogi Berra. And those 10 World Series championships for an individual still stands as the most in baseball history. And even though Roger Maris didn't get the big hit to fuel the rally in the 9th inning of Game 7 in the 1960 World Series, Maris still got plenty of big hits throughout the 1961 season, breaking Babe Ruth's all-time record for home runs in a single season and becoming a baseball legend. The last thing I'd like to do in this episode is to thank all of you for your engagement with Sports Rule Pod. Remember, if you have an idea for a sports rule change or innovation that you'd like for me to scrutinize on the show, you can submit that by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. Like or subscribe wherever you find the podcast, and look for Season 1 episodes to be released every 2 weeks on Friday mornings. We'll see you next time.